The hum of the Intergalactic Alliance recruitment station was a constant, low-frequency vibration that made Elias Ward feel like the universe itself was slightly annoyed with him. He leaned against the railing of the observation deck, arms crossed, boots squeaking against the polished alloy floor, and surveyed the parade of potential recruits. Tentacles twisted and uncoiled in synchronized hostility. Bioluminescent eyes blinked at him from every conceivable angle. One candidate even tried to communicate with him by spitting a stream of glittering acid droplets in the shape of what must have been a greeting. Elias swallowed and nodded politely. "Yeah, hi," he said, though he doubted any of them understood. The Alliance trainers, perched nearby like impatient hawks, whispered assessments that would have been terrifying if Elias wasn't too busy suppressing a grin. "Number 17 shows promise, but her jaw structure suggests poor grip endurance," one muttered. Elias glanced at the speaker, a muscular being with 6 arms, each holding a datapad, a laser scalpel, and what looked suspiciously like a frying pan. "Gripping a sandwich is critical in survival scenarios," Elias muttered under his breath, and the nearby trainees snorted. But then he noticed her. She wasn't glowing, she wasn't twitching neon appendages threateningly, and she certainly wasn't spitting acid. Her long ears quivered slightly, brushing against her shoulders in a way that reminded him of a cat testing whether it could trust a strange room. She had human-like features, though her skin shimmered faintly with a pearlescent tone, and her amber eyes scanned the chaos around her with quiet intelligence. There was something deceptively fragile about her posture, the kind that made people underestimate you until you had to explain why you just dismantled their fancy weapons with one hand. Elias felt an uncharacteristic twinge of curiosity. While the rest of the trainers and recruits whispered predictions of failure, he stepped forward. "I'm taking her," he announced, loud enough for heads to turn, eyes to widen, and one 6-armed brute to nearly drop all 3 of his datapads in shock. The trainers froze mid-sentence. One muttered, "Are you serious?" as if the entire room had suddenly tilted on its axis. "Yes," Elias said deadpan. "She has ears, big ears, that's a tactical advantage in any alien combat scenario. And also, I like her look." He gestured vaguely, trying to mask the sudden self-consciousness. "No, really, ears, big ears can hear things potentially important." He didn't mention that he had a soft spot for underdogs, or that he found humor in ignoring the ridiculous expectations everyone else placed on combat recruits. The trainers shook their heads, muttering about bureaucratic nightmares and morale disasters. The other candidates looked on with a mixture of curiosity, disbelief, and barely concealed glee, certain the human had lost his mind. The first day of drills was a symphony of chaos. Lyra, as he learned her name, struggled to lift the standard-issue plasma rifle, her delicate fingers fumbling with switches and triggers. Every time she misfired, a holographic target would explode spectacularly, sending the stronger recruits scrambling and grumbling, while Elias ducked behind a console, trying not to laugh. "Careful, you're going to trigger a meltdown," he quipped, though the entire exercise area smelled faintly of scorched synthetics already. "Maybe you should try using your long ears to aim," he joked loudly, and Lyra rolled her eyes but smiled faintly, a brief flicker of amusement that made his chest tighten a little. Humor became their currency. While other trainers barked orders and threats, Elias made sarcastic commentary. "Ah yes, the mighty Lyra, defender of the Alliance, slayer of training dummies. Don't hurt yourself with all that raw skill." The other recruits muttered under their breath, some laughing, some fuming. Zero-gravity maneuvering was another fiasco. Lyra spun like a top, her ears floating above her head as she attempted to stabilize with the magnetic boots that seemed to have a mind of their own. A hulking Martian warrior bounced off the wall in the background, muttering something about low-gravity etiquette, which Elias translated aloud. "Martian code, don't bounce off walls unless you want interplanetary embarrassment." Lyra managed a shaky laugh, and he felt a spark of confidence for the first time in weeks. By mid-morning, the trainers had mostly given up trying to control the situation, resorting instead to frantic note-taking and occasional eye-rolling. Elias found himself impressed by Lyra's persistence. She didn't have brute strength. She didn't have glowing psychic energy or armor that could withstand asteroid impacts. But she had focus, a kind of quiet observation that cut through the chaos. She noticed patterns in the training simulations, small anomalies the others missed, and sometimes predicted where the malfunctioning drones would drift next. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it made him grin every time. When a rogue drone zipped past, knocking a helmet off an egotistical alien candidate, Lyra calmly tapped a control panel and sent it spinning harmlessly into a wall. The room fell silent for a beat before the absurdity of their own incompetence hit the other recruits, and one of them muttered, "She's cheating." Elias shook his head. "Nope, just clever, and yes, I picked her for that reason." During breaks, they shared dry humor to offset the ridiculousness of their environment. Elias told stories about the time he accidentally fired a missile at a cafeteria door, or the time a wormhole generator turned his comm device into a small fireworks display. Lyra laughed, her ears twitching with each chuckle, and for a moment the universe felt manageable. Amidst floating toolkits, malfunctioning drones, and sarcastic quips, a bond began to form, a bond rooted not in strength but in observation, trust, and laughter. By the end of the day, the other recruits had begun to take notice. Whispers replaced laughter as they watched Lyra quietly correct her mistakes, anticipate hazards, and subtly manipulate the simulation environment. Even the trainers, though reluctant to admit it, nodded when she executed moves that none of the supposedly superior candidates could manage. Elias stood back, arms crossed, and allowed a small, satisfied smirk to cross his face. "See," he muttered mostly to himself, ears, big ears, hidden talents, who would have guessed. That night, while the station hummed softly under the glow of distant stars, Lyra sat beside Elias in the observation lounge, sipping a strange fluorescent beverage that tasted faintly like mint and iron. She glanced at him, ears twitching, and said quietly, "You really think I can do this?" He grinned, tapping his chest. "I picked you, didn't I? Besides, everyone else is too busy looking at muscles and firepower to see what really matters." Lyra's lips curved into the smallest of smiles, her ears brushing against her shoulders. The station outside thrummed with life, chaotic, unpredictable, and full of impossible challenges, but for the first time, Elias felt certain of one thing. Sometimes the weakest-looking person could be the one who changed everything. And if anyone doubted him, well, he had jokes, lasers, and a secret weapon with long ears on his side. The first chapter of their story had begun, not with a bang, not with triumph, but with laughter, awkward misfires, and the subtle promise that appearances were deceiving, and the universe was about to learn a very important lesson. The transport ship shuddered as it slipped out of the Alliance docking bay, a gentle but insistent vibration that reminded Elias of the time his grandmother's hovercar refused to start and then launched into orbit like a caffeine-fueled rocket. He gripped the railing, glancing at the crew and his team of mismatched recruits, a collection so strange it could only exist in a galactic recruitment manual gone rogue. There was Crix, the six-armed Martian with a habit of narrating every single action aloud, whether anyone asked him or not. Tila, the energy shield specialist who insisted on wearing her bulky exosuit to sleep, eat, and occasionally brush her teeth. And then there was Lyra, seated cross-legged on a maintenance grate, long ears resting against her shoulders, eyes scanning the ship's controls with quiet intent. "Zero-gravity orientation complete," the ship's AI announced, voice monotone yet tinged with what Elias interpreted as mild sarcasm. "Please refrain from colliding with walls, equipment, or other crew members." Lyra tilted her head slightly, as if acknowledging the warning in the same way one might nod at a particularly cautious houseplant. Elias grinned, leaning toward her. "You ready for some zero-G fun?" he asked. "Or are you going to float around like a confused balloon again?" "I think I can manage," she replied, voice calm, almost serene. Her ears twitched once, and for a fleeting moment, Elias swore they seemed to flicker with a faint glow, like signal lights only she could detect. The mission was simple in theory. Reconnaissance and stabilization of the outer colony of Kepler 452e, a mining station teetering on the edge of a gravitational anomaly that made even experienced pilots sweat. Rogue factions had been spotted nearby, and the Alliance wanted eyes on the ground before deploying heavier forces. Simple theory, complex reality. The team's landing on the colony was anything but smooth. Magnetic boots refused to cooperate, forcing Crix to slide across the floor, limbs flailing in what looked like an alien ballet gone horribly wrong. Tila tripped over her own shield generator, sending a minor pulse of energy into a wall panel, which startled a maintenance droid into performing a backflip and disappearing into a ventilation shaft. Elias ducked instinctively, muttering, "Zero gravity etiquette, people ever heard of it?" Lyra, in contrast, moved with careful precision, almost as if gravity itself bent politely around her. Her long ears swayed with each subtle movement, occasionally brushing a control panel or sensing vibrations in the colony's hull that the others completely missed. When a ceiling panel trembled dangerously, Lyra caught it mid-fall, giving it a gentle push back into place before anyone even realized it had loosened. Elias whistled softly, who knew long ears could be a superpower. Humor became the thread holding the chaos together. Crix, narrating as always, described Lyra's actions like a live broadcast. Subject Alpha manipulates gravitational anomalies with astonishing grace. Must be some kind of alien ninja. Elias rolled his eyes, shaking his head. I told you, just follow her lead and try not to explode anything. Lyra's faint smile was almost invisible, but it anchored him amid the absurdity of their situation. The colony itself was a maze of metal catwalks, shifting corridors, and low-humming machinery that sounded suspiciously like the digestive system of some enormous, unseen creature. Rogue faction patrols were sporadic but deadly efficient, their sensors capable of detecting the slightest energy fluctuation. Elias and the team had to tread carefully, though their overconfidence, or in Crix's case, overnarration, made stealth less subtle than it should have been. When they encountered the first patrol, it was comically disastrous for everyone but Lyra. Tila, in an attempt to raise her shield, accidentally reflected her own energy pulse back onto herself, bouncing into a stack of cargo crates that toppled like dominoes. Crix panicked mid-narration, spinning 6 arms in every direction to no effect, while Lyra calmly ducked behind a control console, assessing the patrol's path. With a subtle wave of her hand, she manipulated the colony's environmental controls, sending a soft burst of pressurized air that gently nudged the patrol in the opposite direction. Elias stared, blinking. I think she just moved them with ears, he muttered. Lyra chuckled faintly, ears flicking. Not exactly, she said, but close enough. The team began to notice patterns in her approach. She didn't rely on brute force, flashy weapons, or dramatic displays. She observed, calculated, and acted with subtle efficiency. Every trap, every misstep the rogues thought they had set, was foiled by a combination of her intuition and her unique perception of the colony's environment. Elias, ever the sarcastic commentator, added his own running narration. Ladies and gentlemen, behold the power of quiet competence. Take notes, you noisy geniuses, take notes. Their progress, though, was not without mishaps. A maintenance drone, malfunctioning from a prior encounter with Crix's overzealous footwork, zapped across the corridor, short-circuiting a cluster of panels. Sparks flew. Tila shouted, I've got it. And promptly electrocuted herself again. Elias groaned. We'll need a bigger first aid kit than this colony has floors, he muttered. Lyra, meanwhile, simply moved around the chaos, ensuring no one got permanently zapped, her long ears twitching as if sensing invisible currents of danger. By the end of the first day on the colony, the team had survived multiple near misses, navigated environmental hazards, and inadvertently created more comedy than combat strategy. Yet the subtle shift in perception was undeniable. Crix had stopped narrating for a few moments, watching Lyra handle a tricky energy conduit. Tila muttered something about maybe she isn't weak, and Elias allowed himself a small, smug grin. As night fell on Kepler 452e, the colony's lights dimmed and the gravitational anomalies caused minor tremors across the station. Elias and Lyra stood on a catwalk, overlooking a courtyard where rogue faction signals pulsed faintly in the distance. The air smelled faintly of ionized metal and something slightly sweet he couldn't place, perhaps an alien tree or just the colony's heating system. You're good, Elias said finally, watching her adjust a panel that controlled the courtyard's energy grid. Better than I thought. Lyra's ears twitched in amusement. I told you I could manage, she replied. Yeah, but I didn't expect this, he said, gesturing vaguely at the subtle but effective web of control she had woven. You're turning the colony into a playground for rogue incompetence, and I think it's hilarious. She allowed herself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. I prefer the term strategic misdirection, she said. Elias laughed, a sound that echoed oddly in the hollow metal corridors. Strategic misdirection? Right. I'll use that when the Alliance asks why our supposed weakest member just saved the day. The night deepened, and the distant stars of the galaxy glittered through the reinforced viewport, indifferent witnesses to the slow, careful building of a partnership. The strongest and loudest didn't always win. Sometimes it was the quiet observer, the one underestimated by everyone else, who would shape the course of destiny. And if anyone doubted that, Elias had a front-row seat to the subtle brilliance of a woman with long ears, a sharp mind, and a sense of humor that perfectly matched his own. They were far from victory. The rogue faction had plans, and the colony was full of traps yet unseen. But in that quiet, chaotic night filled with sparks, laughter, and low-gravity misadventures, Elias felt certain of one thing. This was only the beginning. The unassuming alien woman he had chosen, the one everyone else dismissed, was about to change everything, and he couldn't wait to watch it happen. The colony of Kepler 452e throbbed under a tense, electric light, as though the station itself was holding its breath. The rogue faction had made their move, activating an experimental energy weapon capable of destabilizing the orbital ring and sending the entire settlement careening into the nearby asteroid field. Alarms blared, but their tone was almost comically overdramatic, like a space opera stuck on repeat. Elias swore under his breath as he ducked a stream of sparks from a malfunctioning console. Seriously, every alarm in this station sounds like it's auditioning for a death metal band. Crix, clumsily clinging to a support beam, narrated the chaos anyway. Alert, alien humanoid threat imminent. Shields at wait, why are you not panicking? Elias groaned, smacking him lightly on the shoulder with a mechanical glove. Because panicking doesn't solve anything, Crix, and it makes me look bad narrating our inevitable deaths. Lyra, standing at the center of the control hub, her long ears twitching like twin radar antennas, was calm, eerily calm. She scanned the energy weapons interface, her amber eyes flicking over readouts faster than any human or alien could process. Elias noticed a subtle glow tracing along the edges of her ears, and instinctively he leaned closer. All right, explain to me why your ears are glowing, because I feel like that's either really impressive or I'm about to die. Not glowing, she replied dryly, sensing frequencies, resonances you wouldn't understand. I wouldn't understand, I almost got zero-gravity physics last week, he countered, waving his hands. Also, you're literally about to manipulate a weapon that could vaporize half the colony. But okay, fine, I believe in ears now. While the rogues prepared to fire, the team scrambled. Tila, still clunky in her exosuit, attempted to generate a defensive barrier, but accidentally bounced herself into a wall, leaving Elias to mutter. And that's why we need a manual called How Not to Be Explosive in Space. Part 2, Crix, narrating frantically, collided with a stray maintenance drone and ended up tangled in wires. Lyra moved with a serenity that belied the intensity of the situation. She tapped a series of controls with precise movements, her long ears sensing minute sonic vibrations, slight hums, and hidden energy flows within the weapon. The rogue faction's interface was alien, sophisticated, and designed to be unintuitive. Yet she navigated it as if the station itself was revealing its secrets to her. Elias watched in awe. Okay, either you're a genius or this is witchcraft, and I'm okay with either. A surge of energy shot through the station as the rogue weapon began to charge. Sparks danced across the floor, and the alarms now seemed intent on giving everyone a migraine. She's close, Elias shouted, ducking another cascade of sparks. Lyra didn't flinch. Instead, she hummed softly, almost imperceptibly, and her ears caught a vibration that no one else could. With a gentle flick of her hand, the energy weapon's core began to recalibrate, its destructive power redirected harmlessly into a containment field. Wait, did she just? Crix's voice was lost in a chorus of buzzing electronics. Tila peeked out from behind a shield generator, wide-eyed. She actually did it. Lyra's lips curved faintly, just enough to show satisfaction. Redirected, the weapon's energy is now harmless. They won't get another chance to destabilize the orbit. Elias, stunned, shook his head. I am officially done underestimating you. You're terrifyingly competent, you know that? Lyra tilted her head, ears twitching in a manner that Elias decided was her version of a smug smile. And you, she said softly, have learned not to judge by appearances. The rogue faction, realizing their plan had been foiled, scrambled for retreat. Their ships attempted to fire back, but Lyra had already activated the colony's defense grid, turning the station's automated turrets against them. A few comedic explosions and a lot of dramatic alarm sounds later, the rogues were fleeing, leaving behind a chaos-filled but intact colony. Elias clapped his hands together, wincing as sparks from a vent brushed his armor. And that, folks, is how you get things done quietly while everyone else is panicking. Take notes. Crix, recovering from his wire entanglement, muttered, I think she's officially our strongest member. Elias smirked. Strongest, smartest, and the only one with ears that could double as radar dishes. Congratulations, Lyra. Lyra's response was a faint laugh, her ears flicking in amusement. I didn't need to be the strongest, just precise, observant. Calculated. She looked around at the team, now coated in a mix of dust, sweat, and alien fluids from various misadventures, and added, and apparently humorous commentary helps too. Elias grinned. Yeah, apparently panicking narrators and overexcited shield generators are crucial morale boosters. Who knew? The team began surveying the aftermath, checking for structural integrity, minor fires, and rogue faction debris that could explode at any moment. Elias moved beside Lyra, quieter now, watching her methodically stabilize the energy conduits. You know, he said softly, when I picked you, I thought I was making a gamble, maybe an embarrassing one. But I underestimated everything you bring: calm, focus, brains, humor. Lyra's amber eyes met his, reflecting the flickering lights of the damaged consoles. And I underestimated your sarcasm, she admitted, but it kept me from panicking. Elias laughed. So we're even then. Teamwork, I guess. Never would have thought our first successful mission would feel like a comedy show with life or death stakes. As the colony's systems came back online, the hum of machinery a little steadier, the team gathered on a catwalk overlooking the central hub. Stars glittered beyond reinforced glass, indifferent to their small victories and chaos-filled heroics. Elias looked at his team, but his eyes settled on Lyra. She had changed the mission, turned potential disaster into triumph, and in doing so had altered his understanding of strength, trust, and leadership. The long, awkward, and comedic journey had forged more than a mission's success, it had forged bonds. Elias realized that leadership wasn't about choosing the strongest, the loudest, or the flashiest. Sometimes it was about seeing potential where everyone else saw weakness, about believing in someone when no one else would. He had done that. He had picked Lyra, and she had transformed not just the outcome of the mission but his perspective on everything he thought he knew about power and courage. Lyra's long ears twitched one final time, a subtle reminder that even in quiet grace she had the sharpest instincts and the most formidable mind. Next mission, she said, a faint smirk on her lips. Try picking someone else for a change. See how that works out. Elias chuckled, slapping the railing. Not a chance. You've set the standard way too high. Besides, who else has ears like radar and a sense of humor that keeps me from crying in zero gravity? The team laughed together, a mixture of relief, triumph, and lingering absurdity. The rogue faction was gone, the colony stabilized, and their bonds were stronger than ever. Crix narrated one final, overly dramatic summary of the events, and even Tila smiled, exhausted but genuinely impressed. As the transport ship prepared to leave the colony, Elias glanced at Lyra, his hand brushing the control panel absent-mindedly. You've changed a lot, he said quietly,